welcome to
Start.
Washington Central. I am Saurabh Shukla. I'm joined today by my special guest, Professor Amitabh Mattoo. He's one of the world's leading strategic analysts, also Dean of India's premier university, JNU's School of International Studies. He's also been a cabinet ranking member in Jammu and Kashmir and also a professor in Australia at University of Melbourne. Welcome to Washington Central, Professor Mattoo.
Thank you very much for having me on Washington Central, Saurabh.
To set the ball rolling, you come from Jammu and Kashmir. That's become Kashmir after the horrific Pahalgam terror attack has become a flashpoint once again. Where do you see the situation unfolding from here on? Do you see the possibility of an actual war breaking between India and Pakistan? Because tensions are really high.
The tragedy, first of all, Saurabh, is that this happened when Jammu and Kashmir was fast returning to durable peace. This terrorist attack came at a time when there was an unprecedented rush of domestic and foreign tourists who were coming to the breathtaking Kashmir Valley. And this also happened when the sentiment against violence, against militancy or terrorism of any kind was at its highest in Kashmir Valley amongst the people. You saw in the post-attack period an overwhelming expression of that anti-terrorist violence with people coming out in the streets. So this has happened has shaken really most of public opinion within Jammu and Kashmir and the rest of India, because the tourists attacked have come from all parts of India, virtually all the states, constituent units of the Indian Republic. So it's very, very difficult time for India, for Kashmir. And the fact is that the mood is that India must take decisive action. And clearly they see in Prime Minister Modi someone who is steely-willed, who can take that decisive action. And if he does not, unfortunately, that will result in a demoralization of public opinion, including his domestic constituency.
What do you see is Pakistan's game plan here? Certainly, they want Kashmir to be simmering all the time. They're not very happy at the normalcy returning, economic gains in Kashmir. What's their game plan?
There's a terrible sense of deja vu as far as Pakistan is concerned. This has happened again and again, and there's a set pattern: domestic instability, and you look for an external way of trying to have that sentiment which is against the establishment directed. India, a bogey of India, an anti-India sentiment is the best way to channelize that domestic discontent. And this is happening at a time when domestic discontent is unprecedented. The economy is at its lowest ebb. The Pakistan economy is collapsing. It's surviving on literally injections of assistance from international financial authorities. Similarly, socially, it's the most divided since independence. And you have an uprising in Balochistan, the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan active in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, the border with Afghanistan flaring up, and the Taliban regime, which Pakistan had sponsored, really disconnecting itself from Islamabad, or more precisely, the army headquarters in Rawalpindi. At this time, you also have a reckless extremist general who's the army chief, and Pakistan's army controls Pakistan. They say that other states have an army. In this case, Pakistan's army has a state. So the Pakistani army chief is someone who grew up during the rabid years of General Ziaul Haq. So he's indoctrinated, he's extremist, he's a zealot, and he gave a speech which was a speech which really belonged to medieval times. It suggested that people of different faith had not only different ideas about their future, but they could not live together. That kind of sentiment is the one which he's directing against India, and which got directed in one terrorist outfit called the Resistance Force, which is really a breakaway, or not even a breakaway, a formation of the Lashkar-e-Taiba, planning this attack and executing it and killing 26 tourists in that process.
Where do Professor Mattoo, as a strategic analyst, where do you see one of biggest challenges for India? Because if we get into a war situation, which it looks like it will be, you have one of the biggest adversary, and for India, China on one side. You also now have Pakistan and Bangladesh, which does not have a favorable government. Where do you see this as playing out in the current standoff?
The challenge for India is really to punish Pakistan's army without necessarily punishing its people, punishing it in a way that doesn't indulge in actions like this again. Deterrence in its classical sense, because Pakistan's army feels that under the nuclear parity or so-called nuclear parity, they can carry out such asymmetric warfare. How do you prevent Pakistan's army to believe that they can continue doing that? And that's what India's policymakers are focused on. What are the costs that will deter Pakistan's army or its intelligence services, intelligence, ISI, from acting like this? And I think at the moment, when you see action come, you have seen symbolic action, some substantive action, but when you see military action, it will be calibrated in a manner that Pakistan has to pay a cost, and that there's not necessarily an escalation ladder built into that calibrated action.
Well, I'm here in Washington, D.C., and closely follow the White House. I know that US President Donald Trump has been very firm when it comes to Islamist terrorism. In fact, when he came to a state visit to India, I asked him a question on Islamic terrorism, and he was very firm. Where do you see the US and especially President Trump coming into play and making sure there is some action? Because US now, if you see, considers India as a key ally, and also with some of the Quad members, they're concerned about this Islamist terrorism posing a threat to them as well.
Really speaking, there is an unprecedented convergence of both values and interests. Apart from the fact that you have a personal chemistry between President Trump and Prime Minister Modi. Also, remember that this incident happened while Vice President Vance was on a semi-official visit to India, having a holiday with his family as well as attending to some official matters. So he was a witness to this huge tragedy. So I think New Delhi hopes that United States will stand with it. It also understands that there are connections that traditionally the intelligence agencies and the Defense Department have had with the Pakistani army and its agencies going back to the Afghan war. Those institutional linkages are there. Pakistanis are good lobbyists, and they engineer their lobby in Washington and elsewhere to dramatically increase their presence, especially in terms of when there is a crisis like this. Having said that, there is hope and confidence that the Trump administration will back India all the way, because this is a Frankenstein's monster. Today, if India is hit and India takes it lying down, tomorrow this will continue, and geographies, as we know, can be changed, because after 9/11, it was a demonstration on what Islamic terrorism can do.
Professor Mattoo, you spoke about punishing the Pakistani army and ISI. A lot of these generals, they have huge strategic stakes, hidden assets when it comes to some of the Western countries as well. Do you think India should lobby US, UK, some of these countries to make sure that they are sanctioned, some of these army officials,
Yeah.
because they are the ones who are perpetrators of terrorism?
Absolutely. Even if the UN Security Council doesn't declare them terrorist outfits, I think the United States on its own unilaterally should declare, including some of those who are serving as officials of the Pakistani army. I'm sure in the days to come, you will have evidence, clear evidence, including probably a smoking gun to demonstrate the clear linkages of these terrorists to the Pakistani establishment. And when that happens, like it happened in the Mumbai attacks of 26/11, we will expect the United States, we expect Washington to act decisively. Because if Pakistan is allowed to get away, as I said, it's a danger not just to the region, but to the entire world.
One of the things is that the FBI director, Kash Patel, he's also come very strongly in support of India. And FBI is a premier investigative agency in the US. So, do you think there is a greater scope of making sure that in a crisis situation, there is intelligence sharing and also greater pressure on Pakistan this time?
Yeah, as I said, in terms of personalities, whether it's Tulsi Gabbard, whether it's Kash Patel, whether it is Vice President Vance or Secretary of State Rubio or President Trump himself, they understand India's pain. And broadly speaking, there is a convergence of values and interests which is unprecedented, but they have to walk the talk. The proof of the pudding is in the eating. India is waiting to see how the United States responds in terms of action on the ground, in terms of actual support, beyond just expressing homilies, which would really amount to very little. So we are hoping that at this moment of crisis and deep pain to India, President Trump will do the right thing, and I'm sure he will.
Where do you see China and Chinese President Xi playing his cards here? Traditionally, whenever an attack of this kind happens, there is a sense that China obviously wants to weaken India. They have gone ahead and supported Pakistan. Where do you see China playing out its cards in the standoff and beyond, and also the relationship with the US?
The knee-jerk reaction is that Pakistan is seen as an all-weather ally. It is seen as a way, uh, uh, Beijing uses Islamabad as a way to box India into South Asia. So the natural reaction would be to support Pakistan if there was a resolution brought against it in the UN Security Council. As a P5 member, China could veto that. It has vetoed any attempts at getting the leaders of the Jaish-e-Mohammed and the Lashkar-e-Taiba declared as terrorists. So that is the knee-jerk reaction. But I think what you need to pay attention is also how China on its border with Pakistan and also within Xinjiang and the Uyghurs has faced attacks from militant groups, and how Chinese personnel who were working within Pakistan have also been attacked. So China must realize that this is a Frankenstein's monster which might be attacking India today, but could well undermine and destabilize China itself. And in the past, while China has diplomatically always stood by Pakistan, but in reality, in terms of actually providing support, military support on the ground during moments of war or crisis, the support has been very limited.
Right. I want to change gears a bit. Let's talk about what's happening in the world. Where do you see Ukraine-Russia crisis heading now from here on? Do you see some, I would say, avenue of peace coming there? Because that's where I would say there is a big bottleneck, because obviously the US energy is also divided in some ways, because they really want, President Trump has been wanting this war to an end, but Russia is playing hardball.
President Trump has put his reputation at stake, even during the campaign and soon after he took over, on both Gaza and the Ukrainian-Russian war. And one had hoped that there would be a ceasefire which would be lasting. Given also the manner in which he read the riot act to Zelensky when Zelensky visited the White House, the Ukrainian leader, and also the manner in which his own emissary has been negotiating with Putin. So we still hope that in the next few days that you will begin to see a ceasefire which is durable and eventually a negotiated some sort of peace on the ground between Ukraine and Russia. The situation, of course, in the Middle East is far more complicated because the whole relationship has so many stakeholders. I mean, the whole idea of peace has so many stakeholders, and the relationship between the main actors is so fractured and is so Manichaean that it is not easy to build Gaza into a kind of Monaco or a piece of the Rivera, which was a kind of fantasy that President Trump outlined initially. I think on Middle East, I'm still very skeptical. But on Russia, Ukraine, I think you might see early success. But remember, I think in terms of President Trump and United States relationship with China, which is really its main international rival today, adversary, I would say, and China is a revisionist, belligerent power which has already demonstrated that it will not obey the rules of the game as far as South China Sea goes, or the larger Indo-Pacific region. It's important to support India as one way of counterbalancing China in that region. And that's why it's important from that strategic consideration as well, from that strategic prism as well, to support India when India is feeling so strongly about what's happened in Pahalgam in Kashmir.
Do you also get a sense, you've closely studied Quad, the grouping of Australia, US, Japan, and India. Uh, do you see, because India was doubling down its efforts when it comes to containing China along with the US and these other allies, and now with Pahalgam happening, in some ways, do you see can be China's double game somewhere to egg on Pakistan to keep the terrorism, machine on, and to put India away from the Quad efforts?
I wouldn't put it past the Chinese deviousness to do that. Uh, we should be on our guard all the time. Unfortunately, we seem to have thought that wishing away Pakistan from the radar of our foreign policy imagination would really mean that Pakistan wouldn't be up to its usual tricks. Just tells you that you cannot ignore Pakistan if it doesn't want to be ignored. And it'll show its presence in the most merciless ways possible. What we have witnessed suggests that we need a long term strategy to deal with Pakistan, not just short term responses, retaliatory responses, but also the strategic stamina to deal with the belligerent neighbor whose own identity is really crafted on the basis of an anti-India identity.
Where do you see the economic impact of all this standoff, these tensions simmering? Because obviously India was and is regarded as one of the key growth centers for the world. Where do you see the economic dimensions kicking in?
At the moment, it hasn't had impact, but if it continues and sustains itself, I suspect there might be a loss of some degree of investor confidence in the region. But I hope that's not the case. Manufacturers like Apple have said that they want to move most of their production facilities for iPhones, for instance, to India from China. Similarly, there are other companies which are investing heavily in India, including in semiconductors, Taiwan, for instance. So therefore, I still see the signs being. I still am an optimist as far as investment go, and there are only positive signs at the moment. But if the the conflict escalates, and if there is an actual war happening, then I suspect there might be a loss of some confidence.
Well, as a student of international relations, and when I'm sitting in front of the guru of international relations, I can't stop but ask you, where do you see this new paradigm of international relations headed to, where you have leader to leader diplomacy eclipsing the traditional institutions which were determining the way international diplomacy would work? You have strong leaders like Donald Trump, Prime Minister Modi. So where do you see that
So,
paradigm evolving?
one of the great gurus of international relations was Kenneth Waltz, and he talked about three images. And he, of course, talked about the image of the decision maker, the leader, domestic politics, and international system. And he asked the question, what causes conflict or war, or what is the most important variable? And for Waltz, it was the international system, the third image. But now you see a coalescing of all the three images. The leader is important, domestic politics is important, and the international system remains important. Which one is more important? The jury is still out. And in some ways, we need to revisit, review Waltz himself.
Thank you so much, Professor Mattoo. It was a pleasure talking to you. Thanks for being on Washington Central.
Thank you very much, Saurabh, for inviting me.